I'm sure all of our families had weird rules with what we could or couldn't do growing up. I mean, rules that had maybe no rhyme or reason, but one way or another have stuck with us now years later. For example, I was always allowed to sit on the kitchen counter, but when it came time for dinner, I was going to sit in my unofficial assigned seat. When we would go to India, I could wear anything that I wanted, but under my skirt or my dress or my jeans, I was going to have to wear my keens. And when we would go to Holi, here as you can see with our family, I could put any color that I wanted on any of my family members, but I couldn't put dark green on my mom. Similarly, if I was upset or annoyed or frustrated, I could vocalize it, but I could never really say that I was bored. I grew up in Danville, California. Our home was on the top of this beautiful mountain, and we looked right at Mount Diablo's always white peak. The summers and winters were beautiful alike. Their temperature ranged from needing jeans and a tank top to a jean jacket to jeans and a tank top and a fleece jacket all year round. And our home outside had this beautiful Japanese maple that my parents planted, and the rocks that lined the cul-de-sac, when you flipped them upside down, had little roly-polies and ants and all these little bugs that you couldn't even name today, which made it the perfect playground for two young girls. Growing up, although our street was picturesque and it was beautiful, my sister and I were the only two children that occupied the street. All the other homes were filled with adults with well-worn routines and children and grandchildren who were older than we were, which at the time was kind of a dream. I mean, unlimited Indiana Jones Legos hand-me-downs and bikes and scooters, which now I'm realizing might have been to the dismay of our garage and my parents. And so instead of having a nanny share or a play date at the home next door, my sister and I gained something better: another set of grandparents. Grandma and Pa, as we called them, lived just 4 houses down, and so we would walk over anytime school was over early or we were just looking for someone to talk to. So we'd walk over and we'd eat orange marmalade sandwiches on the porch, and we would have conversations, and we would count how many of the stray cats would come to eat the kibble Grandma left on the driveway in the morning. And anytime there was a mundane lull or no activity planned, and my sister and I would say that we were bored, Grandma, without looking up from her newspaper or whatever she was doing, would say that boredom is a state of mind. I never really understood what that meant. I mean, boredom is a state of mind, but just figured that if it was something she was saying over and over again, it must hold some kind of importance. To me then, at 5 or 6 years old, being bored meant that I just didn't have anything to do. Maybe my sister didn't want to play Barbies, or the 49ers game on the TV wasn't really capturing my attention. I was done coloring or painting. I just didn't have anything to do. I was bored. And now, as I've gotten older, I've come to understand that boredom itself isn't about the absence of something to do. It's about the absence of distraction. It's that uncomfortable feeling, that tight, restless feeling that you have when there's nothing to distract you. Boredom itself is this epitome of not having the next best thing to do anymore. And in a world in which we are today, where productivity is always encouraged and every minute of every day is supposed to be filled with something to do, boredom is the first thing that's really challenged that. I mean, think about your own screen time. The average adult in the United States spends a minimum of 11 hours on any given screen every single day. I mean, this ranges from your Instagram and your TikTok to your Google Maps and your Ring camera, your health app, that little app you have that opens the garage door when you get home. It's a lot of time. And when our minds are constantly being pulled in all these different directions, it leaves less and less time for our minds to just wander and stay still. And so when individuals are finally using that B word, bored, it seems difficult. It challenges us. It kind of is the first time in which we aren't being entertained for 1 second too long, and we're forgetting how to deal with that. Now, boredom itself is widely perceived as negative just because of its association with discomfort. However, what we're realizing is that boredom is a lot more common than we think. In a study actually published by the University of Virginia and Harvard, we see that 66% of adults claim to have been bored at least once in a 2-week period. However, this boredom comes with this negative connotation. It additionally comes with feelings of discomfort, as well as disarray, as well as loneliness, which is something that we're seeing. And so when someone says that they're bored, it's often coupled with this idea of, I'm sorry. And so boredom itself, as I've come to realize it, isn't about this idea of having nothing to do. Scientists are now realizing that boredom itself doesn't result in the brain shutting down from activity. However, what happens is that the brain's muscles actually become more enhanced than they are with just 10 minutes of not being stimulated. What happens is that the brain's default mode network results in higher memory retention, higher rates of imaginative thinking, daydreaming, better problem solving, mental connection, and better thinking efficiency just with 10 minutes of being unstimulated. I mean, when's the last time that you just sat spending 10 minutes with nothing to do? It's just becoming more and more uncommon. And so instead of viewing boredom as something that's negative or something that's difficult, we should take it as something that can be harnessed in a vessel to become more creative. I grew up spending my summers in Sundarnagar, which is this small town in the foothills of the Indian Himalayan mountains. In Sundarnagar, there are more cows and more goats and more buffalo than people. The same seasonal recipes with seasonal vegetables have been cooked the same way for generations, and all the village folk know one another just by endearing nicknames. Perhaps one of the most special things about growing up going to Sundarnagar for months at a time was the fact that my sister and I didn't have phones, and the service wasn't always reliable. And so, effectively, our summers, we grew up with them technology-free. Besides the occasional Mr. Bean episode that aired or Pop Tropica that we would play on this big box computer in the living room, we grew up unstimulated. We learned how to chop onions super small and how to take the sap from rubber trees to make potions. We spoke in our mother tongue and learned of these stories from my mother's childhood. My sister and I grew up unstimulated, but never understimulated. Studies show that when people experience brief periods of boredom, it results in something called mind wandering. Mind wandering only occurs when you're unstimulated for a brief period of time, but results in higher levels of creative thinking as well as motivation. Psychologists realize that with mind wandering, idea generation is at its peak, as well as creative problem solving. And so my sister and I had empty time and empty space to do nothing but wander our minds. We would make outfits out of leftover scrap fabric, and we would make up games, learn to speak in a way that we wanted to. It was absolutely a way in which our minds were able to wander freely. Now, there are 2 studies which kind of highlight the fact that 2 emotions which result in the highest rates of invention, problem solving, creativity, and motivation. These 2 feelings, these 2 emotions are maybe a little difficult to understand, but seemingly also obvious: joy and boredom. Joy makes sense. It makes immediate sense. I mean, we would expect people that are creative and motivated to be joyful. When I think of Da Vinci's Mona Lisa or The Starry Night by Van Gogh, I think creative, I think colorful, I think innovative, I think excited. And studies show that when individuals are creative, it results in higher rates of confidence, better communication skills, as well as overall success in interpersonal relationships. And so joy to me feels iterative, it feels innovative, it feels generative, it feels like when I'm joyful, of course I'm creating something that's beautiful and new and exciting. But boredom? I mean, how does boredom paint the Mona Lisa? Or how does boredom paint the Starry Night? The answer itself lies with a study that was created by psychologists a couple years ago, where there were 2 groups of individuals that were working towards the same common goal of painting a landscape painting, and that was the only instruction. The first group was tasked with reading a monotonous passage, reading the phone book, copying a passage from this phone book, any kind of mundane task that you could think of. The other group was simply given the task of painting whatever they wanted on their landscape canvas. What they found was that individuals who were given the monotonous task first actually produced more original art pieces, creative works, as well as things that didn't have any overlap with the other individuals in the study. When they went straight into the creative task, there was a lot of repetition, as well as not as much color used and not as much creativity exhibited. And why would this be? Because boredom itself is a trigger. It's something that indicates that our mind in the current state isn't being stimulated, and so it encourages us to push through and find our own creativity. In a world where we're constantly being stimulated, there's always something to do. The idea of the next best thing or the next post or the next scroll is becoming streamlined. Boredom is beginning to challenge that. At the end of 8th grade, I got a phone, and I know that might sound really late to any of you Gen Alpha or Gen Alpha parents out there, but I promise I was okay. The only thing I really felt like I missed out on was the Snapchat dog filter, but alas, I'll survive. And it was just a way for me to feel as though I could be creative for as long as I wanted. I made crafts with empty paper towel rolls and drew on the extra gum wrappers before those commercials even came out. I learned how to propagate my plants and make cards and watercolor, all things which I'm sure sound familiar to you as someone, if you're in the audience, as a close friend. I feel like the reason I continue to be creative and am able to entertain myself is because of the fact that I was encouraged to be so for so long before. Today, nearly 60% of Gen Alpha own their own personal device before the age of 10. Many of them have never lived in a world in which they're not stimulated for a long period of time. I mean, to them, the phone has almost been creative to fill this void of boredom, to ensure that they don't have to sit still or sit with their boredness in any way. What's actually happening, though, is that creativity is dropping simultaneously. There's been a 65% drop in creativity that we've seen in Gen Alpha just in the past 10 or 15 years. This is a direct product of the consistent stimulation that we've begun to see with our phones and with our digital devices becoming really mainstreamed. Researchers also suggest that Gen Alpha has struggled the most with boredom, just because it's been this word that has been so heavily negatively connoted for so long. And here's the irony. Boredom has disappeared from our lives, but our obsession with it has seemingly increased. We've begun to use the word bored more commonly now than we have ever. Since 1950 till now, we have used the word bored more than triple-fold. We've begun to fear it, we pathologize it, we think about it all the time, but not because we understand the benefits, but because of how daunting it may seem. So maybe the problem is that not that we have been bored too often, but maybe that we're just forgetting how to be bored well. And maybe the idea is just that this word needs to be reclaimed and reimagined as well as relearned. And so I'm not telling you to paint the next Mona Lisa or to paint the next Starry Night. What I'm telling you is to maybe not listen to music while you're painting it, or to go get your canvas from the store without being on your phone. Maybe I'm telling you to not watch the reference video or to think about from memory what colors were used instead of looking it up. Maybe the end idea isn't to paint the Mona Lisa or to paint the Starry Night after all. Maybe it's to be bored long enough so that you can create your own. And so I leave you with where I started, that boredom is really just a state of mind. Thank you.